Hello, it's Paul Clegg here, and I'm absolutely delighted and excited to be talking with an old friend of mine that's recently moved to South Africa. Is Cliff Walker. And Cliff Walker has had a dream career in a market-leading company, in a corporate environment, in the drinks industry. And then at some point, he chose to go it alone and start up a business on his own. And that business has proved extremely successful. I'm sure he'll let us know what that's about. But he entered an industry which, for a lot of people that think they know better, is an industry that sometimes has had bad press. It's the network marketing industry. And what we wanted to do is to get on today to talk to Cliff about what's made him so successful in his experience. Why do people get it so wrong? Why do many people fail? But why do those that succeed make an unbelievable amount of money and do extremely well? Cliff, welcome.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm delighted to be on here with you today. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I don't know. Normally when you meet people, you say, well, you brought some good weather. Well, it's absolutely throwing it down here in Somerset. I daren't ask you what the weather's like in Pretoria.
It's absolutely beautiful. We're coming out of our winter, just coming into spring. Spring starts officially next Tuesday, but we've had some glorious weather. I'm looking out the window. My office looks over the city, actually, and it's beautiful out there. Sorry to tell you that.
Well, we're looking forward to autumn, I think, to it stop raining. I can't complain. We've had Pretoria-type weather since the beginning of March.
Great.
Before we get onto the subject today, just tell me a little bit about what you used to do before. And I know you're from Blackpool, and I know you're a Blackpool Football Club supporter, not far from Accrington. But tell us a little bit about, what you did before your present business profession.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. My background's a corporate background, really. I spent most of my life working for large multinational companies. I started my career when I left school in retailing, because my dad had been in retailing. And then I moved into sales and ultimately into sales management and then into sales training. And I tended to work in a lot of different industries, but the last corporate role I held was with a company called United Distillers. That's now Diageo. That's the world's largest drinks company. We had brands, they've probably changed some of the brands now, but we had Bell's Whiskey, Gordon's Gin, Absolute Vodka, Johnny Walker, some wonderful brands. And I held latterly an international role with them. I was a regional sales manager in the Northwest for them originally when the old Arthur Bell's company merged with the Distillers company. Then I moved into sales training, as I said. And then my last role with them was an international project based out of Hammersmith, where I worked in a number of international markets, worked in Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, the States, Canada, right throughout Europe. And I was launching something called the Knowledge Program, which was a program that was all about educating people about these wonderful brands that we had that many people didn't know about because they'd come in from other companies. And we impacted about 14,000 people, I think, around the world with that particular program. And then it was after the corporate world, I left to become a management consultant. I was given a couple of options corporately. We were due to go and live in Hong Kong. And then we looked at Middle East and Africa. A couple of other options came up, but I left the corporate world and became managing director of a consultancy. And that was actually, I was paid to look at the network marketing business model as a consultant, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So that's a little bit of my background.
It's funny how you delve a little bit deeper into people's background. You realize what you've got in common. We've always thought we've both got a corporate background in common, but actually I started out in retail. What were you retailing?
I worked for the first job I had was with a department store group from the Northeast, Binns. Part of the House of Fraser. There were House of Fraser, Binns, I think have all closed down. I think pretty much all of the stores gone. And then I went to the old, what used to be Brentford Nylons, if you remember Brentford. Yeah. They got rid of the nylons when I joined them. It was just Brentford's. So I went as assistant store manager to the Blackpool store. I left Binns, went assistant store manager. And then what happened for me to move into selling really is my sister, my elder sister, who unfortunately died of cancer a couple of years ago, but my older sister started going out with a guy that was working for Ross Foods, if you remember Ross Foods, yeah. One of the foods company. And of course he was a rep and he had this car, and I thought, gotta be got to get myself a car. So I started applying for sales jobs. So it was the attractiveness of having a company car, I think, that originally attracted me towards a sales career. And you know, I joined Crown Paints, actually had a fantastic training with Crown, and then was able to progress through and you know, do pretty well. And academically, I wasn't great, played a lot of sport at school. So I came out with 4 O-levels, 3 of them were English. And people say, how do you manage to get 3 English O-levels? There's only English literature and there's only English language. How do you get 3? Well, in the school I went to Blackpool Grammar, and we had an English O-level that we could take in the 4th year, the Oxford O-level English language. So I got that one as well. So 3 English and maths, not maths, history, I think was the other one, definitely not maths.
Well, I went into retail menswear sales, and I'd come away with 3 O-levels, 2 of which were history.
Very
So,
good. Well, I worked in menswear in bins, and it was just like Are You Being Served. We had every character that was like Are You Being Served in that department. Yeah. It was just the best time of my life, really.
Well, I was with Home Brothers, and I'm, you know, but anyway. And the other thing is, my eldest son is a creative head with a large advertising agency, and for quite a few years, he's been responsible for some of the Diageo brands.
Oh, great! Yeah, great.
So amazing coincidence when you delve. So you moved from a corporate background, which had moved through sales and moved up to senior positions. You'd gone into training, which naturally led you into consultancy. And I know lots of business consultants, etc. It's quite a tough business out there for business consultants. And you looked into the network marketing industry. Was that out of curiosity? Was it to look for what was wrong with it, what was right for it? Why were you looking at it?
No, it was a client. I was working on behalf of some other consultants that I knew, a consultancy company, and they had this client that was looking at how could they get their brands to the consumer without going through the high street. It was a leather goods company, actually, and they were struggling because their brands would normally be sold through, you know, Salisbury's and the retail stores in the high street, and they were struggling to get their brands through to the consumer. So they wanted to look at how do we get to the consumer directly, and I got employed to do that consultancy project. So I started looking at the model really, at how companies, and I like to call it, well, I call it collaborative marketing now because I think collaboration is so key, but it's also direct to consumer marketing, because that's really what network marketing is, especially these days with the e-commerce facilities that we've got. And so they were looking at how could they get their products directly to the consumer so they didn't get held up with distribution or failure to get distribution in the high street. As a result of that, you know, I looked at the model and thought, this is great, because if you look at the model, one of the things that stood out for me, Paul, was how sensible it is, with my management consultancy hat on and my corporate hat on, how sensible it is for corporations to use that model. Because if you think about the way companies pay for their marketing costs, if they've got a choice of a fixed cost or a variable cost, most companies would go for variable cost based on sales, but in fact, they have a fixed cost. They have to pay the sales force, they have to pay the sales force expenses, they have to pay for TV advertising, they have to pay for listing allowances to get into the stores, they have to pay for promotional activity. That's in the hope that they're going to generate some sales. Whereas what network marketing or direct consumer marketing companies do is they use their marketing budget after a sale has been made. So most people would choose that way of paying a marketing budget. Variable based on sales is much more sensible. So it just made sense to me as a model, you know, from a corporate standpoint. And in fact, I actually was asked by, and this is going back some years, but Guinness approached me because United Distillers was part of Guinness. They were looking at how do we get some of our secondary brands that we can't get into the high street stores, how do we get them to consumers? And they knew that I had, you know, some background in that industry or that marketplace at that time. So lots of companies, you know, are exploring how do we get directly to the consumer and get through the high street. So the model just made sense to me. And then I looked at the skill set and I thought, you know, I'm sure I can use some of the skills I've developed over the years and apply them here and do pretty well. So that's how I got interested or got started, really.
Okay, so just before we go into what happened, you know, what were you faced with when you got yourself started? Before you do that, funny enough, I was having a conversation yesterday about a particular company that grows their business through the network marketing business model. And I had to explain that there is no such thing as a network marketing company. We've had this discussion before. Network marketing describes the route to market.
Exactly.
You know, either a company's a skincare company, it's either a skincare company, a nutrition company, a telecoms company that chooses to market via a network. And I think when people get that, they realize that they start to look at the sort of things that you've talked about. And the person,
it's the route to market, Paul. It's just a route to market, another channel. It's as simple as that.
And that person, funny enough, said, well, why is it they're not selling through retail? And of course, then if you examine the retail business model, especially the high street and the retail model, that has been eroded by people like Amazon, etc. And so the typical retail model, wholesaler to distributor to retailer, is broken. You know, it's broken.
And the cost to get into that market, as I say, because you can't get your brands onto the shelf. Like, you know, take Asda as an example. I don't mean to pick on Asda. Tesco's probably the same, but certainly Asda. You know, if you wanted to get into the Asda store, you had to pay a listing allowance. You had to pay for the privilege of being on their shelves. And actually what Asda used to do, I think they used to take that money, literally put it in a drawer, and that was their new store opening budget. You know, they took that money and they used it to expand their stores. And so, you know, there's a reason why companies don't get on retail shelves. There's only so much space on a retail shelf. It's very competitive. It costs you a lot of money to get into a store. Then you've got to pay extra if you want to be at eye level versus low level. And there's, you know, all these things, Paul. There's all this stuff. And then, of course, they want a massive TV advertising budget because they want that stock off the shelf faster than it went on the shelf. So unless you can support your brand with huge marketing budgets and huge TV advertising budgets, you know, it's a very tough route to market, the retail marketplace these days, I think.
I think the other point that you've not even alluded to is the fact that the companies that are marketing through this method are actually paid before the product leaves their warehouse, before it's shipped. Whereas the way you just described, you're waiting on, you've got all those upfront costs, and then you've got to get paid for the product probably on 90, 120 days. It's very, very intensive in terms of. And
that's what I was saying about when I did the research as the consultant corporately. You know, that's your fixed cost. All of those things that we described. You know, you've got your fixed cost, and then you wait for your money. Variable cost based on sales, but you're actually getting paid prior to the sale being made. It's just a sensible model. When I've spoken to sales directors and corporate people, and I asked them that question, if you had a choice, you know, would you prefer a fixed cost for your marketing or a variable cost based on sales actually made? They would choose it every time, but it's just not feasible for most corporations, and that's not the model they operate.
Okay, so there could be people watching this thinking, oh, well, I'll start to market my product through word of mouth, and of course a lot of people do that through social media, etc. But let's just talk about it, you as a seeing an opportunity. Were you looking to, did you give up your consultancy business? Were you looking at this as a side income, or were you looking at it as a serious income? Because I think the majority of people that get involved in any business do it in a part-time or sometime way. What was your approach?
My approach, actually, I would encourage people to do that. I like to refer to the term parallel income. You know, and I think with what's going on in the world today, people need to think about, you know, some people talk about a plan B or a part-time income. It's a parallel income that can be run in parallel with however people generate income normally without risk. And for me, what happened was I was actually doing some consultancy work then for United Distillers, or one of their offshoots, really, Schiffling Somerset, which was a US-based company. So I was a month in the UK and then a month in the US, and a month in the UK and a month in the US. So I started my business part-time, but I started it in the wrong way, because I think if you want to start a business part-time, it's much better to put a dedicated amount of time in, even if it's a restricted amount of time, consistently, where I was, you know, doing quite a bit when I was at home in the UK for a month, not able to do much in the US. So it's like pushing the car. I use the analogy of pushing a car. Once you get it going, it's great and it'll pick up its own momentum. But what I was doing is pushing the car and stopping and pushing the car and stopping and pushing the car and stopping. But eventually, you know, I got the car going and it's turned into a great career for me. So I started part-time, and after about 12 months, I gave up my very lucrative consulting project. It was significant, multiple six-figure income that I was earning, and told my wife that, you know, I'm going to take up this little part-time business. She thought I was mad. And then a few months down the track, when we got our income up in the business that we were in together years ago, you know, it was the best idea she had ever had. You know, it's the best idea that she had ever come up with, really. So, but part-time is the way to go, I think, for people, realistically, unless they've, you know, got a chunk of money that can sustain themselves for at least 12 months, because otherwise there's pressure. You know, there's pressure on paying the mortgage or paying the credit cards or getting the car payments or putting the children through university. And if you're under pressure, that comes across, you know, when you're speaking with people. So for me, part-time is definitely the best way forward, really.
I know everybody talks about part-time. You make a very good point about giving a devoted amount of consistent time, because if you had a part-time job in a bar from 6 till 11, 3 days a week, you turn up and work those 6 till 11, 3 days a week. The trouble is, most people work it sometime, and sometime businesses don't really pay. Because if you turned up at the bar and thought, I work it sometime, you'd be fired.
Yeah, well, some people try to work it in their spare time and they don't have any spare time. That's why it's not a spare time business. It can be a part-time business, but it can't be a, you know, it can't be a spare time business. You raised a good point though, Paul. If I can just raise this, because, you know, people fail in network marketing. You're absolutely right. Most people fail at, you know, at many things. But for me, and that's part of the reason I think we're doing this video interview, is to a large extent the wrong people have been attracted to network marketing. You know, and those people are often the people that are desperate, and they're very unlikely to be successful in any type of business. They're not really cut out for business. So what I'm doing now is, you know, I look for a different type of person. I'm not looking for, you know, the desperate or the needy. I'm looking for the people with the skill sets that can be used to integrate into the model to have success. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. You know, if the wrong people are attracted, they stick at it for a week or two, they don't have any success, they drop out, and then, oh, it's the worst thing since sliced bread. You don't want to be touching that sort of thing. I had a go at it and it just doesn't work. So I think there's a failure for people within, it's not really an industry, as we've said, within network marketing, of attracting the wrong people. And often that's driven by people in network marketing saying the first thing that you've got to do is get your first couple of people in 2 days, or, you know, in your first 24 hours. And people are desperate to attract people, so they'll say anything to try and make it sound simple so that they'll join them. And then, of course, it's not as easy as it's made out to be. I was told I just had to sign up and sit by the letterbox and, you know, the checks would come through the door. That's not how it is. It's a business that, you know, requires effort. And so I think people over the years, the wrong people have been attracted, and they've been attracted almost out of pressure of people feeling, you know, the job is to bring people in. And I think that's a big failing, really.
But I think you just said effort. It also requires skill. A majority of people, I think if people have had a business and know the challenges of a business, cash flow issues, people issues, deliveries, all of those things, that I find that those people are probably more open to, if they'll take the blinkers off, to the network marketing model, because all of those concerns, and I was attracted to the industry by the fact that my first business venture failed not because of my lack of skill, but my lack of awareness of cash flow. So I didn't want cash flow issues. I didn't want people issues either. But it still requires a new set of skills. If you've already been even an employee, or you've been running a type of business, you can't expect to think, I wouldn't expect to walk into a franchise for a McDonald's and think I could run it. I'd have to be trained, I'd have to be, and I really would have to develop the skills necessary.
You're absolutely right. And a lot of people in networking talk about attitude being, so important, and having a good attitude and a positive attitude. Of course, that's important. It's important in any career, frankly, I believe. But skill set is critical. You've got to develop the skills. Now, some of the skills you might have developed in your corporate career are transferable skills depending on the type of role that you had. That's why I tend to look for people that work in sort of people-oriented businesses, sales, not because this is necessarily a heavily sales type business, but because the skills that you develop in that type of career relate to listening and questioning and people. And so, it's so important to develop the right skill set, I think. And that's often, you're right, that's often put down as, oh, you don't need any skills, just have the right attitude and you'll do well. And, you definitely need skills as well.
That also could be a barrier. And I'm only saying that because when I left my corporate career, I was extremely successful. I was a general manager of a large international hair care company. And then all of a sudden, I was attracted to finding out and open-minded to find out more about network marketing. The first person I met is somebody who's a mutual friend who clearly knew what he was talking about. And I remember distinctly putting my ego to one side and what I know and what my position was, etc. I put that straight to one side and I thought, I'm going to listen to this guy. I've always thought that salespeople can be their own worst enemy because they think it's about selling. And yet, if you look at the model, it's building a distribution and training and supporting people. There's got to be a big part of what you do, which is probably why you've been particularly successful, because of the training skills that you brought to the party.
Yeah, it's not a selling business. I'm laughing, Paul, because you've described me perfectly. Because when I got started, I was very fortunate to be introduced by an industry legend, and you probably know the name, Jerry Campese, an exceptional character. And this is back in, I think, 1997, and Jerry was making $3 million a year then. I mean, that's a lot of money now. It was, a great deal of money back in 1997. And I looked at what Jerry was doing, and I'd come from corporate, and I was, I had a sales and sales training background, and I looked at what Jerry was doing, and I thought, wow, if he can make $3 million a year doing that, I'll make $6 million a year doing it Cliff's way. Well, of course, I didn't make a penny, because what I didn't understand then that I understand now, I had the skills, but what I didn't understand then is that he had a proven and predictable pattern of activities that were working, and I was trying to reinvent the wheel. So what you've just said is absolutely critical, because no matter how successful you are, just as if you went into a new career anywhere else, you'd have to learn and understand that. Putting that ego to one side is key, and that is one of the biggest failings of people. They try, and it was the biggest failing for me, trying to reinvent the wheel when I first got started. And then I was fortunate that I put my tail between my legs, went back to Jerry and said, look, Jerry, show me how to do it properly. And I've gone on to be, very successful. And I put a lot of that down to, the coaching and support was given by Jerry way back, in the late 90s. But absolutely critical point you've just raised there.
You also make another good point, which I've always thought to be an attractive way in which this business works, is that Jerry actually saw something in you that maybe you didn't see in yourself. You saw something different in you. And very often, if I look back on my career, and if most people do that, it's because somebody sees something in us that we don't see in ourselves. And I think the nature of this business is that everybody can be successful if they're coachable, and that they turn to the right coaches. And that's why I believe that the industry does breed a very good attitude to one another, whereas corporate can be a bit dog eat dog. And right now, with all the friction that's going on and the uncertainty, you can actually see that there's a lot of people stressed, a lot of people unhappy. Whereas I've always found in joining a network marketing meeting that the people are very upbeat and very positive. I don't like the hype. I mean, how do you cope with that? I mean, and I think that puts a lot of people off. and the hype is the overselling of the whole thing. I mean, you are extremely practical and down to earth.
I put it down to a phrase I've used for many years: is excitement, hype, and hope. You know, and if that's all you try and use as your methodology or process for building a business, it will work for some time. It might work for 12 months, might work for a couple of years, but what happens then is, you know, everybody is dropping off the back because they're not being given the support, they're not being given the training, they're not being taught the skills that they need to be successful, they're not being mentored properly. So I think, you know, there's a place, if you go to a large corporate event, there's obviously got to be a little bit of excitement and a bit of rah-rah and a bit of energy, just like there would be in a sales conference at you know, companies that you've worked for or companies that I've worked for. You know, there's always a lot of energy there. But I think that, you know, we've got to put the practicalities of getting rid of that excitement hype out, and that's what pushes a lot of good quality people with a corporate background away, because they go to a network marketing meeting and they think, what is this? You know, what on earth is this? I work for Gillette, I work for Diageo, I work for Procter. You know, this doesn't look or feel like a proper business. And then in their minds, a proper business is, you know, the corporate organization that they work for. And so we push a lot of good quality people away. But I think one of the attractions, and I'll just touch on this, is the fact that corporately now it is dog eat dog. Even when I was in the corporate world, the reality is that as you try and go up that corporate ladder, you are competing with colleagues, and there's less and less opportunity as you progress up, because, you know, if you're trying to get the sales manager's job and you're a salesman, there might be 7 salesmen competing for the same job, or, you know, you can take that up a level. And the beauty of a network marketing business, of course, is there's plenty of open space, so there's no competition, because, you know, there's as many openings as people that want to get into those openings. And I think that's refreshing, because corporate organizations are much flatter. So I think that's attractive. But I do think we have to play down, you know, that excitement, hype, and hope element, and try and present it in a business-like way, so we attract some of these professionals that are under pressure given the current situation around the world as a result of this pandemic.
Well, if anybody's watching and follows YouTube, and increasingly numbers of people are doing that, but I do see a lot of people who clearly haven't made it, pretending they have, and overhyping their business. You know, I made £3 million last year, and I owe it all down to Amazon affiliate or drop shipping, etc. And I do fear that people are being sold down the river, and it's of concern to me also that when you're making that transition from employee, whether it's as at the bottom run or whether it's as a manager, through to starting something on your own, it is fraught with challenges, and people are going to buy into things quite naively. What would you say to somebody who is open enough to look at this industry? What would you say to somebody like that? What should they do?
That's a really good question again, Paul. And I would say do your due diligence, but do proper due diligence. You see, due diligence, people think going on Google and typing in a company's name or something is due diligence, and it's not. Because, you know, the internet is full of misinformation as well as good information, you know, and so that's not due diligence. Because if you go in and type any company name, you'll see good things, you'll see bad things. You type in the term network marketing, you'll see good things, you'll see bad things. I would encourage people to do proper due diligence, and that means proper research. There's lots of great books on the industry. You know, become a scholar of the industry. Research properly, understand the business model properly. I was very fortunate to get paid as a management consultant, so I've seen it from a very different place than most people that get invited by a friend to go and watch a video or come to a presentation. Do your due diligence. If you find a company that you like, check out that company. Don't just Google it. Speak to people that are working the business. If you're just generally looking at network marketing, speak to leaders from different companies, get a sense of, you know, what the industry is or the business model is really all about. if you pick a particular company, try and speak to some of the corporate people in the company, and if you can, make a visit to the company, because this is a career move. If you were making a career move to some of the companies I spoke about, Procter & Gamble, Gillette, Diageo, wherever it may be, you know, you wouldn't just take the job by Googling it, you'd go and visit the company. And I would encourage people to do that. I mean, I know some of the companies might be based outside of the UK, but I would do whatever level of due diligence you can, but please do proper due diligence and don't just Google it, because I feel that, you know, I've seen so many people come back with horror stories that aren't really horror stories about good people and good companies.
There's got to be a good fit with the company that you're partnering with, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that good fit as well, Paul, is not just about the products or the services. You know, it's about the people that you're going to be engaging with. You know, the products or the services, again, you don't have to necessarily be completely in love with them. Most people who have got a McDonald's franchise haven't got it because they love burgers. They've got it because they love the business model and the market potential. So pick a company that has market potential. Pick people that you want to work with, you feel that you can trust and that you can engage with and that can support you, you know, and go to market and run it like a real business. Don't poke it with a stick, because you'll not be successful, and then you'll be one of those people that probably write on Google that, oh yeah, I tried that, it didn't work for me. So don't poke it with a stick. If you're going to engage, you know, give it at least 12 months and build a proper foundation. This is a 3 to 5 year project, not a 3 to 5 minute project or a 3 to 5 day project or a 3 to 5 week or even a 3 to 5 month. You know, this is going to take some time, but you've got to put the investment in terms of time and effort. But picking the right company, the right partners, as you've said, is absolutely key.
As you've just said something there, and there's people out there that have put years of time and effort, and yes, they've been paid, but they at a stage where they've reached a position in their company and all of a sudden they're no longer needed, and yet they seem to want to walk into something. I think the other thing that's a challenge with this industry is that certainly legally over in this country, I don't know about in South Africa, you can't spend any more than £200 to get into a business. So it tends to be, and there are businesses where there's no cost to get into it. And unfortunately, if you've got a low cost, you almost take it for granted. It's easy to get into and it's very easy to walk away from. But I know that if you've just invested in premises to open a cafe and all the equipment that you need for that, or you've just invested tens of thousands of pounds in a franchise, maybe had to borrow money to do that, then you're going to approach it in a totally different way. The fact that you're not going to recoup that investment for another 3 to 5 years is beside the point. But do you think that people ought to be, you see, I think if people are looking to imagine it as a serious franchise investment or a business, brick and mortar business, you would take it more seriously, you'd stick at it for longer, and probably you'd interview the employees or the people you want to work with to take this forward a lot more diligently. I mean, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, the same way, Paul, really. When I'm engaging with people, you know, I'm quite selective. So for me, we have a couple of assessments. You know, I'm the only person that has access to these assessments. I work with Dr. Paul Stoltz from Peak Learning, and we have 2 assessments. One is called the Grit Gauge, and that it looks at the quantity of grit and the quality of grit that somebody has, and the other is the AQ, what we call the AQ profile, and that measures somebody, that's the adversity quotient. And so it's looking at, you know, whether people have got the stickability, the grit that it takes to be successful, and how they handle adversity, because this, like any other business, is going to be a little bit like a roller coaster. So I actually use a couple of assessments to actually identify whether people, and it's helpful for them as well as for me. I want people that have got the right grit and stickability, and I want them to understand, have they got, or are they likely to have what it takes to be successful in a business like this for themselves. And then what I look to do is say, hey, let's engage in a 12-month plan. Let's develop a 12-month plan grounded in reality. So in other words, if somebody comes into the business, I like to say to them, what would you like your income to be in 12 months time for that month, the 12th month of engagement, where you could look back and say that's a year well spent. Ground that in reality. And what I mean by that is that if somebody comes in, you know, and they're making I don't know, let's say 60,000 a year. You know, they've got a decent position, they're making 60,000 a year. If they're trying to make 60,000 a month in 12 months, how's that grounded in reality when it's taken them however long it's taken them in their corporate career to get to 60,000, which is the equivalent of $5,000 a month or £5,000 a month? You know, where's that grounded in reality? So we try and ground it in reality. And I tend to say to people, how about we match your income or even half of your income? Where else are you going to go to get a 50 to 100% increase? And let's set it in a sensible manner. And then I have a planning process for, working back from that to get them to that. So I look, two things to summarize, let's get the right people in. The assessments help attract the right people and help them understand whether it's something that they're likely to have a chance of success at. And then let's have a 12-month plan where we're going to engage as partners over the next 12 months and not over the next 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. See, in network marketing, people have 30-day or 90-day plans, and they have those plans because they expect people to drop out after 30, 60 or 90 days. So let's have a 12-month plan, and let's agree that we're not really going to review how successful we've been until the end of that 12 months. Because obviously that first 12 months is the foundational period of building the business.
I suppose also, if you were starting a traditional business and you had to invest time in helping upskill those people, and you're investing time and they're constantly leaving, it can get very frustrating. And given what you just said, if you're about to invest in somebody, you want to make sure they're worth investing in. It's a two-way stream, isn't it?
It is, and that's part of the assessments for me, Paul. It's like it helps me understand whether I've got somebody, that's got a chance of success. I don't want to work with someone who hasn't, because it's not fair to them and it's not fair to me. Because, like you say, if you're going to work this business seriously and you pick the right partner and the right support team and the right company, they are going to be investing a great deal of time and effort in helping you succeed. So, there's investment on both parts. There's investment required from the person starting the business, but there's a great deal of investment from the person who might be enrolling or supporting that person in terms of helping them succeed. So that's key, I think.
People are talking about the new norm. People are questioning how the high street's going to survive. People are questioning how travel and all of that, and I personally believe that we will get through this and we will get back to a lot of norm, maybe slightly different. Where do you see it going, and where do you see this type of business fitting in? It certainly changed its appearance in the time that I've been involved. I very rarely get somebody talking about pyramid sales, which always makes me smile. But where do you see, what will the network marketing industry look like in 2-3 years time, in your view?
I think, Paul, it's a very different business than those people. I had a conversation, I said to you just before we came online, I had somebody today, saying, oh, it's one of those pyramid things. That's a complete misunderstanding the model. The model is nothing to do with pyramid selling. It's nothing to do with stocking your garage up with a load of products, because in fact, you handle very few products. If you pick the right company, it's an e-commerce business model. We use digital marketing strategies. It's a very different business than it was even 5 years ago. And I think the future, it's a sensible plan B or parallel income for people, because you can't rely on, job security. It just isn't there. And particularly after this particular situation that we faced, and we're currently still facing, we're still in the middle of it here in South Africa. The reality is that the future is going to be very different. The only person who is in control of your future is you, and you're the person who has the responsibility for that. But I think it's going to be very different, because with the tools that we've got today, Paul, with the likes of Zoom or BlueJeans and Skype and all the technology that we've got available, you can run a global business. The company I'm partnered with, we're in 146 countries around the world, and I can build it all from here with the technology that we've got available. So irrespective of what happens as a result of will people be able to travel, when we will be able to travel, we can't travel at all out of South Africa right now. The fact is that with the technology that we've got, I'm in South Africa, you're in the UK, and it feels like you're sitting across the desk from me. It's a different model today, and it will no doubt be even more different over the next 2 or 3 years as more new technologies come out.
Well, it's quite interesting here in Wells, in Somerset. We've got a great high street, but it's suffered like everybody else. And during the start of the lockdown, I'd wander around taking photographs, etc., and there'd be businesses that have signs up saying why they were closed. And occasionally, you'd come across more of a multiple saying that we're closed, but you can still buy from us online. And there's a lot of people wish they'd had an e-commerce part to their business. They wish they had their business online. And there's a scramble for a lot of those businesses to get online. And yet you're talking about a business that you have that's an online business that people order online. They get delivered just like Amazon, and you've created a business around it. So in fact, I'm asking about the future. In actual fact, this industry is already ahead of the curve.
It's already ahead of the curve. You know, we have a business here, and I'm not speaking specifically of my business, but the business model, typically, if you pick the right company that's global, you know, I can be in South Africa, introduce a friend of mine in Australia, they can go to the website in Australia, order the product, ship directly to them, and I get paid. And I think the other thing that I would say, you know, high streets have been caught out, some of them not having an online e-commerce business, but I think a lot of people in their career have been caught out because of this pandemic, because they didn't have a parallel income. They didn't have a plan B to fall on. And some people are really struggling as a result of that. I've just recently been talking to an ex-Blackpool footballer, actually, who had started his own business. You know, then the pandemic hit, and now it's like, you know, that business has disappeared. Now he's exploring the possibilities. Might not be the right fit for him, but I think it's just sensible for people to have, whether this is the right model for them or not is not the point. The point is, it just makes sense, because we don't know what the future holds, to have some sort of fallback, you know, whatever that might be, but have some sort of fallback from an income perspective, you know, and an income ideally that is not dependent on you, the individual, being the focal point. That's what really attracted me when I did the research, Paul, from a personal standpoint, the concept of leveraged income. Removing myself from having to go to work day after day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and being able to build something that I could get paid on time and time again without being the focal point. Of course, you've got to put time and effort into building it. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you can find a business model where you can remove yourself from being the focal point of income generation, because if the job stops, the income stops, or if you can't work, the income's likely to stop. So having that plan B or parallel income, if you find the right vehicle, I think is key as we move into the future, particularly as a result of what's been going on the last few months.
It's funny enough, I still get paid 14 years ago. I introduced a product to somebody who researched it on the internet, decided to buy that product, and I've been paid every month for the last 14 years. And yet I've lost touch with where that person is. And I still find that incredible. It's not a massive amount. And you know what? I think one of the things that I would run away from is where people are talking about you can be a millionaire, and I think that puts a lot of people off.
Absolutely.
My way of thinking, as a parallel income, sometimes making an extra 500, 600, as little as, relatively as little as that, it makes a significant difference to somebody's life.
Yeah, because the disposable income, you know, when people have paid the mortgage, paid the credit cards, paid the car payment, if they have to make a car payment, you know, put the kids through school, bought the food, all the stuff they have to do, the actual disposable income for most people, I don't know what it is in the UK, I used to know, but it's, you know, it's a few hundred a month probably, and for some people it might be less than that. So if you can actually just double people's disposable income, you've made a dramatic difference in somebody's, you know, lifestyle. It doesn't have to be about making 100,000 a month or making $1 million a year or whatever it might, you know, all those numbers that are tossed about. It's actually about how can we increase your disposable income. Your disposable income drives your lifestyle, your lifestyle choices, where you can go on holiday, you know, the things that you can do, the Christmas presents that you can buy when you've got some spare cash, birthday, all of that stuff is dependent on your available disposable income. And so if you can find a way to increase that, and as you said, you know, a few £100 a month makes a massive difference, because for most people, that's more than they have available as a disposable income. So very valid point that.
But you see the pain that somebody's in, you see the challenges that somebody's facing, and you see something in them that they perhaps don't see in themselves. They know that what they've believed in the past hasn't worked, and they've perhaps heard different stories. I only wish that people would take a more considered look again, whether it's for them, whether they're capable of doing it, is another matter. Depends what their expectations are. In closing, what would you add to that?
I think you've said it all there, Paul. It is frustrating, you know, and sometimes people, you know, just aren't open enough to explore new possibilities. I do think that what's happened as a result of the pandemic is I'm certainly finding that people that maybe would have been a bit closed-minded, you know, a few months ago, are a little bit more open now to exploring possibilities. We still do get some people poo-pooing it, thinking the big mistake is people think they understand what this is without really understanding it. And unless you explore it properly, you can't make a decision whether or not it's right for you. As I say, I was fortunate as a management consultant to look at it from a different place than most people. But, you know, I would just encourage people to be open. If the timing is right for you to explore new possibilities, explore those possibilities, but explore them properly. You know, don't make a judgment based on old history or what you used to think a few months ago. You know, explore it, find out whether it's right for you or whether it's not. If it's not, no problem. But if it is, you know, you just might have unlocked the door to a very exciting future.
Well, I know you've only been in Pretoria from only a few months, but I do hope that as the lockdown is lifted, that your future is exciting. And I'd like to think that one of the things that I've always enjoyed about the network marketing industry, I've met a lot of very, very great people, and I've known a lot of people that make significant income. So the chance to come and enjoy some of yours hospitality would be great. So I'm waiting for that. You did invite me to Uruguay as well, but I looked at the route to Uruguay and I thought, oh, that's a bit too much. But South Africa is more.
It's a bit of a shorter route here. You can go straight from London, and we're half an hour from Johannesburg International Airport. Sort of sits between Johannesburg and Pretoria. So we're, you know, we're right on the doorstep of the airport, really. It's only about 8 hours, and we're also in the same sort of time. No jet lag. We're only an hour difference, so no problem. Whenever, and we've got plenty of space here, no problem.
We'll have to make sure when there's some. We'll try and time it so when there's some cricket on.
Absolutely. Well, I've got a whole bunch of people trying to get here next year because the British Lions are on tour. So, you know, we're busy at the moment trying to get boxes sorted out. And in fact, the guy we bought the house from played in the 1995 World Cup final for South Africa. So I'm hoping, you know, he can pull a few strings for us to get us a few tickets for the British Lions tour. If it takes place, they're saying it might possibly be postponed, but hopefully next year we'll have a bunch of British people over for that. And the cricket is just down the road. They play the cricket actually in Centurion, you know, and that's 20 minutes away. We pass the ground quite regularly, so you're more than welcome. Cricket, right. Rugby, anything you want.
I don't know whether Blackpool are playing over at your place or Accrington Stanley, maybe Manchester United.
Maybe, yeah.
Cliff, thanks very much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure. All the best.
Thank you very much, Paul. Really appreciate it. All the best to you, and I hope it stops raining.
Eventually, yeah. Cheers.
Bye for now.